Hi, welcome to Virtual Newsmakers. I'm Debbie Elicksen, and I'm here with my co-host Cynthia Seymour. Today,
Hi.
today we're going to have a shout out Friday, and one of the reasons this topic came up is I have to admit, yesterday on Facebook I posted one of those throwback Thursday photographs of me and my girlfriend Sharon Everson, who, oh, how do I start this story? I met her through another person, Mary Selzer, who back then her name was Parsons. Anyway, Mary and I met through a hockey magazine. They had a page for pen pals where readers could connect with other people who were fans of certain teams, and I was looking for a Boston Bruins fan to connect with. So that's how I found Mary, and this was back in high school, and so this was over 30 years ago. And so Mary and I were writing each other letters. This is snail mail back then. And through Mary, in a roundabout way, I met Sharon, and Sharon and I started writing each other letters. So we met for the first time back in '78, and Sharon flew to Alberta, Canada for 2 weeks. And then I flew back to New York City with her and spent 3 days in Boston to meet Mary. And then we've been writing ever since. And then when social media came about, now we're connected through Facebook, and we talk to each other almost every day or see each other's feeds every day. So it got me to thinking that there are some connections in the digital platforms who have become close pen pals, you might say, that we know we would never have met if it was not for these platforms. And they could be personal connections, business connections, and in my world, personal and business connections tend to blend together. So, in fact, I'm sitting here with my virtual pen pal right now, and I'll let Cynthia tell our story.
Yeah. No, I think that what you're talking about is something revolutionary that we're experiencing for the first time in human history. And humans, I think that we all generally want to connect with each other and connect with people that share common interests and values. And digital communications, to me, I don't even like to call it social media anymore, because I feel like social media is such a lame word. It almost connotes this traditional media push of everyone's message.
It puts it into a tiny box.
And I think that that's so limiting in terms of how we create relationships today. And the reason why I say that is when businesses start to think about just using these technologies as a way, again, to market and push their message, they're not recognizing the vast possibilities for humans coming together and creating really amazing projects together. And so that leads me really into what we're talking about today, using digital communications. As you connected in 1978 with these two wonderful people, women that you've had this relationship with throughout life, and then digital communications came along, but you connected because you had a common interest, like I said, in hockey. We now live in a world where we can play games with, we can get on video chat with, we can text back and forth, we can send pictures, and we can meet people all over the world that have the same interests and values and things that, you know, passions that we have. That being said, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about how do you connect and find those people, and I think that there's no scientific answer to that. You and I were connected to one another a couple of years ago and started this webcast along with Tonya, Scholz, and Susy Rosado, both out of Miami, but you're in Canada.
Yes.
And
we were introduced by another fellow who was wasn't he in Indiana?
no, in
Francisco?
Chicago, Francesco
Yeah.
Palacio.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant fellow. And he really, I think he saw the potential connection between all of us, and he was really the spark that pulled us all together. So that being said, you know, never in a million years, if you'd had a crystal ball and you'd said to me 5 years ago, you're going to be having an online show with someone in a completely another part of the world, and you will be working together on various projects, I would have been like, what are you talking about? But I've had the opportunity to, especially with this webcam technology, to put together teams globally and to teach them how to work together in a more efficient and effective way. And to me, that's not about social media or marketing at all. That's really about humans coming together and making big stuff happen. That being said, my dream job would be to teach people how to come together globally and make big stuff happen. And it's happening already because of this technology. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, you know, that's true. And like I say, one of the things I think that we need to do is kind of shout out to some of the people we've met in these platforms, whether they've turned into business connections or personal connections. Like I say, in my world, business is personal.
Yeah.
I can't differentiate between my connections in any of the platforms, whether they're business or personal, because they do tend to blend.
Yeah.
Because when I've worked in book publishing all these years, books are personal. I don't give a crap what anybody says.
Yeah.
You're bleeding all over the page, and when you turn your book over to somebody else, it's like giving somebody the keys to your house and say, hey, babysit my cat for me.
Yeah.
And you just met them 2 minutes ago. So,
Yeah.
but social media or digital media.
It's the media part. I hate that word.
I know. I have a list of people that I picked out for, you know, if we're going to go through a shout out, because of, this is where I met them, but some of these relationships have turned into friendships off camera too. Well, actually, we didn't necessarily meet on camera, but out of the computer.
Right. Well, and I think that you're right, Debbie, in the sense that business is personal.
Fellow in particular that Rob Gilmondo, who I've had on the show. Cynthia wasn't on the show.
We're having a little trouble with Debbie's.
For sure, you were doing or whatever. But anyway, Rob is a freelance sports writer like I've been, and Rob works with the Fischler Report like I did. We would not have met if it wasn't for him taking the olive branch and introducing himself to me on Facebook in a direct message. And what's happened since then is our friendship has blossomed. We've met in person a couple times. He's actually during staying in Calgary. It's been a friendship that would not have developed the way it has if it was not for the internet. So I have to give a shout out to that. So Cynthia, you're next.
Well, I would agree. You know, I met John Butterill and Bruce Garber through Google Plus Hangouts and their virtual photo walks. And Bruce Garber, in a lot of ways, is such a great mentor in terms of how to produce shows. And John and I formed a connection where we were able to come up with this volcanic eruption of various business ideas. And we just had that synergy. And he came down to visit here, too. And so it's crossed that boundary or that barrier between knowing each other virtually and knowing each other for real. And he was very instrumental in sort of us developing this idea to create virtual newsmakers. So we're really kind of like, you know, sister and brother, I think, in a lot of ways with that, with our two shows. I'd like to really reforge and foster that relationship with them as well.
Agree, and there's another fellow that that kind of turned into friends with both of us, and we met him through the webcast that we did with Tonya and Susy, and that's Mitch Jackson, who's the California trial lawyer,
yeah,
who's very active on the internet and in all these platforms. And Mitch, he's been on our show here a couple of times, but the cool thing is Mitch has written the foreword to my next book, which will be coming out soon. So, and I was actually messaging him last night on Facebook. He's actually getting me a screenshot. He's talking to Chris Brogan,
who is also on our show.
He's also on our show, so I don't know whether I'll be able to use this screenshot or not, but it's something that I could also, you know, it's just that connection that we've developed. And I would not have neither of us would have met Mitch if it wasn't for...
No, Mitch is terrific, and he has really, he's almost a weekly part of my life, because his advice to us, or his challenge of the week, was to take a look into our local Rotary Club. And I, a week later, met my sponsor who brought me into the Rotary Club, and it has been a huge part of my life in terms of being able to give back to the world philanthropically and in terms of community service. In fact, yesterday I was asked to be on a board for their foundation. So I'm very, very excited about that. And that would have never happened without Mitch making that recommendation just on our show.
Yeah, he's turned into quite the friend, and he's just awesome.
So thank you, Mitch.
Yeah. So who else do you want to give a shout out to?
There's so many people really who stands out for me, and he really is a like mind, and I absolutely love getting into conversations with him. And I met him before G+. I actually used to tweet back and forth with him, and that's Neil Faree. And he is just such a brilliant mind. And I had this opportunity to connect him and Nazim Beltran in a conversation using Google Hangouts. Now, Nazim is in Milan, and Neil Faree is in California. And being able to be the connection between a web developer and really one of the top minds in search engine optimization today was quite this moment. You know, I felt like, you know, that would have never happened in a million years. Like being able to we might have been able to have a conference call, but I certainly wouldn't have been able to put them into a face-to-face conversation with each other, and I could see them really building out a lot of great work. Another example of that was last week or 2 weeks ago. I was teaching a workshop to the Caribbean Tourism Organization and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, and they represent 32 islands. And what's cool about it is each one of those islands, while they have that Caribbean brand, they also very much, each island has their own culture and their own world. So they've got different interests, and they're having to come together into one place. And they happen to be in one room around a boardroom table in Miami in a hotel at that point. And what was fascinating to me is I could see Linda D on Google Plus Hangouts. I could see her, and so I pinged her using Google Plus Hangouts and said, "Who are you online with?" And she gave me a list of a handful of people. Well, it was 8 people from all over the world. And Linda D, if you're not connected with her yet on Google Plus, she is one of the most terrific connectors I've ever met in my life, because she can see people's common interests and put them together. I call her sort of like the virtual matchmaker, basically. And what I loved about that moment was I was able to say to them, listen, I want to show you a way that you can have a conversation without having to be in a hotel conference room, and where you can come together and work together without having to feel like you have to email each other back and forth, which is what Sarah Hill calls. Sarah Hill is another personality on G+ that I think is really instrumental. But she calls it asynchronous communication, and it's when you email a person and then they email you back, and then you email them and they email you back, and things get lost into communication because it's not real time. And so I was able to bring Linda D into that room with 8 people from around the world, and I showed this Caribbean group how to use webcam to actually crowdsource information. And we asked the crowd, we had someone from Georgia, the country of Georgia, we had somebody from Paris, we had somebody from Rome, we had somebody from England or the UK, we had a couple of people from the United States, and someone from Canada. And so we had 8 different countries all on the line at that moment, and we asked 8 different people around the world what was the first word that came to their mind when they heard the word Caribbean. And so they were receiving all kinds of different answers and responses in that one moment that were completely separate from how they see the Caribbean. So there's a way that they internally see the Caribbean, and the way that the world perceives the Caribbean that was being discovered at that moment. So I think it opened their eyes to the possibilities of how they might work together better internally as a team, but how they might actually reach out to the world beyond them and let the world know what the Caribbean really is. So
yeah, and the key to all of this, because you see this a lot, and I think we talked about it a little bit on that other show, is you don't know who people know. So when you get a friend request on any of these platforms, and you sit there and you're like, well, I'm not going to connect with them because I don't know who they are. Well, how the hell are you going to meet anyone if you don't connect with them? Who knows? They could be somebody remarkable. And I'll give you, I mean, I could give you a gazillion examples, but I'm going to give you one in particular. I don't think I've shared the story before. It says you can kick me if I have, but Christopher Pawelski is an onion farmer in upstate New York. And I met him, how did I meet him? I was watching a Reliable Sources show, and with Howard Kurtz, and there was a topic that was happening, and I commented on his Facebook page, and in that Facebook feed, this other woman, Kathleen Mitchell, and she's in New London, Connecticut, and she's quite a pistol. She was in her 70s back then, and she was very hilarious and funny, but very political. So we had got into conversation, and I told her I thought she was hilarious. And anyway, we connected, but through her, I met Christopher. Christopher is now connected to my sister, and he's entertaining the heck out of her because he is like the funniest guy you could ever meet. He posts crazy stuff on his Facebook. He's got this, I told him he has to do a book about this because he's got this thing where when he's bored, you know those spam emails you get from the, oh, I'm Vanessa, blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
He answers them. Keeps the story going. He did this as well, and he posts the entire conversation on Facebook. And I mean, it goes on forever and ever. And she kept sending him pictures, and then he started getting really nutty with his responses. Like, I've never told anyone else, but I'm actually a secret agent. It just got really bizarre, and it was so hilarious to see this this story, transcend on Facebook. So this is my friend Christopher, and who's also a college football fan, by the way. So we've actually communicated on a Saturday and talked about football together. But that is a relationship that there's no way I would have even known that man existed, or even Kathleen,
Right.
if it hadn't been for being on these platforms.
Well, and it goes back to, it's not who you do know, it's who you don't know yet. And
Yeah.
I have a client that was like, why am I doing all of this? And he's like, I meet all these people in local networking, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, when you meet people with in your local networking, are you communicating with them and connecting with them using these platforms after you've met them, or did you just take their business card and move on? And he looked at me, and I said, because you've got to you can foster those relationships using digital communications. And then I said, and on top of that, you need to be making not only those relationships start to ignite, if you will, but you need to understand that your information, as you're sending it out into the world, you don't know who you don't know. And you don't know who in 1 year from now might be doing business with you because they liked what you wrote or liked your point of view, or you were able to help them through something that you wrote or did. So it's a combination of who you know already and your history, and who you don't know yet that will impact your future. And for me, I really, in a lot of ways, Facebook has been this repository for everybody from, reconnecting with everybody from the past. And then I bring future people into it as they come into my life. But G Plus has been much more, and Twitter, I would say, has been much more about people who I don't know yet. And LinkedIn has been a really interesting balance of the two. So I'm now at this point getting responses from people who have done business with me in the past, or had relationships with me, friendships or whatever in the past, say, that are seeing what I'm posting on LinkedIn, for example. And in fact, this week I got a text message from a former client who's been seeing in the background what I'm doing online, and reached out to me to help. He's got a chain. He's managing a series of restaurants that need some help online, and of course, he was close enough to me to know to text message me that was the best method of communication for me. But then again, we've always been close. We just lost connection with one another. So you don't know when and where and how, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there in terms of your passions and your interests and your talents, because you don't know who's going to see it and who's going to come your way because of it.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, a lot of the offline relationships have, while you knew them offline, they don't necessarily always connect what you do for a living. And so if you don't fill out your profile bio as succinct as you can, how are the people going to know who you are? And that is actually your online resume. And I've had people who, like Theron Fleury, who used to play for the Calgary Flames. He and I were have been colleagues off the ice, and of course he retired. And if you've read about some of the challenges he's gone through since he retired, but Theo is so awesome, and he and I connected on Facebook again. But he's actually introduced me to some people who've actually turned into other, turned into kind of business colleagues. In fact,
Right.
Through him, before I went to, actually last year, I worked on a book of a fellow's who was a connection through Theo. So you don't know, and And I think that because I had my bio on there, and I mean, he knew me, he's known me for years, but, you know, sometimes it just takes, oh, one day they look at what, they take a look at your bio and they think,
Right.
oh, I can introduce them to so-and-so who's looking for that right now. So you don't know, even the people that you do know don't necessarily click with
Right.
some of the things that you do in business until they take, until it's the
Well,
right timing.
I think what people need to understand is that we're moving into a new age of being able to connect and work with people globally in real time, and that when they limit themselves to just who they're meeting in a networking meeting, they're not even beginning to fathom the possibilities and the pure potential of being able to connect and collaborate with people all over the world. And I'm at a point where, if, like I said, if I would give anything to be showing the world, and part of the reason why I'm passionate about this show is we can show the world how to get into these conversations and how to make internal things happen even if you're remote, but also how to connect outward. And again, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
To me, that's a major thing. I
It doesn't also about business either.
For me, okay, all right, you want to shift into a personal situation? I had my high school sweetheart reach out to me via LinkedIn, of all places, after 25 years. And we have started this absolutely phenomenal courtship that never would have worked 25 years ago, but right now we are now more connected than ever. And who would have ever thought that would have happened via LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's not a dating site.
No, not at all. And I'm not on any dating sites. I have a massive online personality and presence, but I do not do online dating.
No.
And I'm very, very picky, and I have a list as long as my leg of qualifications that no dating site could probably handle. It would probably blow up the dating site. But the reality of the matter is I'm notoriously super picky, and never in a million years did I think that if it had happened, if it had been 25 years prior and we hadn't had a way to connect, that we would have been ships passing in the night. And because of digital communications, we're actually able to, there's a sequel to this story, which is very exciting. So
That's very cool.
yeah. So it's not just business, but for the purposes of this show, I really think that people need to understand digital communications from a business perspective. And to me, while there is a personal element to it, I do think that we're here to try to help from millennials to baby boomers navigate these changes that are happening to us, because this is causing a financial and economic revolution. And this is very scary to a lot of people who don't quite know how to navigate all of this. This is very scary to the powers that be that don't know how to control all of this. And this is what they're not, I feel like the majority of the world is not quite optimizing the power and the potential of this incredible way to make massive things happen. And I kind of want to segue into somebody that I met this week. I actually play a game, and I love this game because it's very strategic. It's called Dragons of Atlantis, and it's a mobile game. And I met this guy who was chatting in the game about being against bullying. And we've had several shows on Virtual Newsmakers about, with Rob Cairns about cyberbullying, this, that, and the other. So I sent this guy a private message, and I didn't know if it was a guy or a girl, or where they were from. And I said, listen, I want to talk to you about an idea. Are you on G+? And he said yes. And then we connected on G+, and we had a full-fledged chat discussion about this bullying effort. And what I found out is that he is a photographer, an amateur photographer, that goes on these long walks throughout Norway. He's Norwegian, to raise awareness about bullying, and we're going to be bringing him on to a show in the upcoming weeks. But I actually want to introduce him to you all today. So I want to try to ping him and see if I can bring him in. So, and this is like a perfect example because, let's see.
That's meeting him through, again, that's an example of meeting somebody through digital platform, but not the social media platform.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and invite him in. And I haven't met him via webcam yet. So this is...
Oh, really? So
no, not at all. We've just chatted. So we'll see if he comes in and says hi.
So it's kind of like meeting somebody for the first time almost.
Yeah, we're both meeting it for the first time. And that's kind of sort of the exciting thing about being able to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll see if he gets the
hangout message. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's priceless, the connections that we've made in these platforms. It's just amazing. It almost makes me wonder, what did we do before this? You know,
right?
How did we even? I always find that when you get a new platform, when we had the fax, before the fax machine, we always wonder, well, how do we get documents from A to B before the fax happened?
Yeah.
And then email comes in. Well, how did we survive before email?
Right.
And now we've got...
Communications were slow, and they weren't real time. And the fax to me was magnificent because it was real-time digital information being sent over, through the world. I used to work with Sanford Bernstein in New York, and I handled clients all over Europe. And I had to get them the stock, equity information from the analysts, Wall Street basically, to the clients faster than they could get it from anyone else. And what happened was, this was even prior to databases being developed. I had developed a spreadsheet so I knew who was interested in what. And the salesperson, the international salesperson I worked with and assisted, their sales started going up. And it was just because we were able to effectively use real-time communications via a fax. To me, when I hear the word fax, I cringe at the idea of faxing anything. It seems like so yesterday. But there was a time where it was the real-time communications that made the business for a client of mine.
Well, I have to say that there are still some publishing houses, not the one that's doing my book, but there are printing firms which still want their confirmation information via fax when you're not in the same place. So I've been trying to train them and say, look, I don't have a fax, and you're going to have to deal with a PDF.
Right.
So what I do is I'll use either the webcam or my camera and just take a bloody picture of the document and then send it to them. So, with the signature. If that isn't good enough, then you're not going to get the business.
It's funny, I'm having trouble with that too, because in so many ways I'm feeling like people are way behind me in terms of communications, and it's super frustrating because it's harder being far ahead.
Yeah.
Than behind, possibly.
And then the other aspect about that too is they want. So, for instance, Cynthia, with the interview that I did with you for my upcoming book, in the past, it would be required that I would have to get you to fill out a form and sign it, so you would approve it.
Right, right.
But because of the digital platforms, I have the interview where we talked about that before we even jumped in the interview, so I have that on YouTube. Then we've also tweeted. There's people that I've interviewed that I've tweeted it. I've actually copied the publisher on the tweet. So these permissions are now available digitally, and Mitch Jackson will tell you these are legal documents.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Let's see if
they will stand up in a court of law, and email, because emails stand up in a court of law as a confirmation. So we've seen mistakes happen through email and through typos where companies have been held on the carpet. I mean, it was emails that brought down companies like Enron. So even if you delete stuff, it's still in your computer digitally. So digital communications are your legal documents as well as how you communicate.
Well, and you know what? That brings about a certain level of responsibility and accountability as well. And that's what people need to understand. When you put stuff online, it's there. And it's there forever. And it's so, you know, if you don't want incriminating evidence on any level online, it's, you know, don't put it out there. And I think that that's a big shift and change too, because now, you know, everyone, especially these millennials coming in, they need to really be clear on the fact that, you know, this leaves a footprint behind forever. And that's really, you know, back to, you know, we've had several shows on that particular discussion right there.
Well, and one of the conversations we had with Eric Coleman was that with your digital footprint, sometimes other people will post something nasty about you. You don't have control over what other people do. And that is a form of cyberbullying and cyber libel. But even if it's out there, all you can do is respond with going about your own business and not responding to their post, because what ends up happening is if the only negative thing out there is that what that person posted, then that makes them look like an ass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. So, you know, anyway, I was hoping to get Ingve in. Let's see. I don't know if he's got a lack of connection or whatever.
Well,
we will be bringing him in to tell his story, because he is a phenomenal person and he's got a really interesting. What I've suggested to him is that he use crowdsourcing or crowdfunding at, you know, platforms like Indiegogo to start to raise money and awareness and sponsorship for his walk that's coming up in August. And the thought behind that is his story is very brilliant, and I think that if the world knew that there were people out there doing these creative things to raise awareness, I think the world would step beside people more. And I really, you know, that's really what it boils down to for me. What are the opportunities out there for getting the world more connected?
And one of the great things about this show that, you know, besides connecting us closer, is we've been able to, whether we've met the guest for the first time on this show, the relationship has continued after in the various platforms because we met on, you know, face to face. And so it's a good connector. So we should, you know, we have a lot of tips in this show, and one of the coolest tips, I think, especially when you're meeting people from globally, is pronunciations of names. And on this broadcast.
Yeah. No, hold on one second. What Debbie's referring to is that earlier today I couldn't figure out how to pronounce this gentleman's name, and so I Googled it. How do you pronounce this guy's name? And I found out it was Ingve, and Debbie was laughing at me because she's like, well, I would have never thought to Google that, and I thought to myself, anytime I have a question, I now Google it, and that is again, you know, I'm going to give my biggest, hugest shout out to Google, because I feel like without Google and without Google Plus Hangouts, I'm not certain that any of these that these magnificent things that have happened for me in the past year would have ever taken on the power and the level that they are now.
Yeah, and I have to give the shout out to all the platforms, because not just Google Plus, because I wouldn't be on Google Plus if I hadn't have taken that first jump into cyberspace and had gone on to Facebook, and that blossomed, everything blossomed from there. So I think all the platforms deserve a shout out, because they've carried on either carried on the relationships that we have, or they've developed new ones. So
right.
So,
well, I am really, really hoping that Google Plus will find ways to really highlight the great stories. I know they did a phenomenal job showing how virtual photo walks has connected people who are not able to get out of their homes to photographers around the world. Their ad was an Emmy, nominated ad. Really, absolutely a tearjerker, and one of the, but it's only one of many examples of how people are using this type of technology to really connect with people and make bigger things happen. And I am hoping they will not drop the ball on this particular thing, because the power that this enables us as a planet to connect with one another is, I think, the biggest unsung hero in in a lot of ways the underdog, because in so many ways this could really massively change this world, and God forbid we ever lose the internet. We'll have to talk about that net neutrality next week. So
yeah, we're speaking of another fellow we met online, and haven't. Well, I've seen him on a Hangout, but I haven't necessarily met him on a Hangout. Andrzej Harasevich. He's going to come on with us next week to talk about net neutrality and some of the stuff that's been happening in the cyber community, like the EU ruling on Google searches and the Comcast merger thing that we should all be concerned about.
Yeah, if we don't step up to the plate and demand that having internet access should just be a global civil right, I think we're going to miss the boat, because if we let corporations take over our ability to connect and communicate as human beings, I think that would be a real shame.
So we're going to have that conversation next week. So we thank you for joining us today and hearing our discussion about connections. And if you want to connect with us, you know where we live.
Wait, Ingrid is on for this. He made it on.
Okay, well,
maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. I can't. His audio isn't good.
Yeah. Ingve, do you have earphones like this? Hi. We need to get your bandwidth up. Yeah. We're gonna stop our broadcast, and we'll chat with you in just a minute. Okay.
Okay.